Now, it's a good job I've got my American World War II helmet to protect me from all these BS comments I've been getting on social media about my video on douche valves. Anyway, in those comments, people have been saying I'm not actually helpful with telling them how to install a douche. So what I'm going to do in this video is kind of explain what is required, and it all again depends on what manufacturer you're using and what system you're installing, because there's loads of different ones. Anyway, let's get on with it and find out exactly how we should be installing douches in the UK to comply with our water regulations. Now, before we start this video, let's get this right straight off the bat. Now, depending on what equipment you're installing and what system you have designed will depend upon what you actually do. Now, first of all, always read manufacturer's instructions on the equipment you are installing, and always make sure what you are installing is Cat 5 compliant. Now, let's have a look at what I've drawn here on the board. So we have a toilet, we have a douche, we have a blending valve, we have some kind of system that is pumped, fed via a brake tank. Now you can buy quite a few different systems. The ones I saw stand out pretty well are the Aqua Boost and the Flow Pack Compact. But again, before you install them, and you need to do a bit of research and you need to read the manufacturer's instructions, because depending on what you're installing, what I've got here might not be allowed. But anyway, let's carry on. Now, just remember, what we are protecting is the cold mains. That's what we're protecting. We are stopping fluid category 5 water in the toilet bowl getting into the cold water main and poisoning the neighbours. That's what we're doing. Okay, so we have this booster set. So in here could be a booster pump with all its components and non-return valves, expansion vessels. So depending on what you're installing will depend on what's inside there. Also the pressure. Some of these make massive amounts of pressure and some don't. So dependent upon what the pressure is coming out of it, you may require a pressure reducing valve. Now, one thing you must be made aware of is if you're going to make one of these yourself, you cannot pump more than 12 litres a minute off the incoming water main. So just bear that in mind, and that's why you need a brake tank also. Because if you just put a booster pump onto your cold water main, you could be drawing the rest of the street's water out. So you will still require a brake tank as well, because we're not allowed to take more than 12 litres off the main. Anyway, also, I know in the Aqua Boost it says if you're installing secondary non-return valves in the system after the pump, then it's not allowed. Now here I've got a non-return valve built into a pressure reducing valve. The actual blending valve has single check valves in there as well, and also we need a single check valve for the water heater to stop the warm water coming back down this way. So anyway, let's carry on. So inside here we've got a pump. It could have pressure reducing valve, it could have low water sensors, it could have no water sensors, it could have all the equipment in there to protect the pump from water running out. And again, depending upon the size of the set you're putting in, you could only have 5 litre storage up here, so you've got to bear that in mind. So we've got a distribution pipe coming out of this pump set, and you're going to require an isolation valve. Now what I've done here is I've put a pressure reducing valve because we've got an under sink water heater. Now again, dependent upon the water heater you're installing, you might not need the pressure reducing valve. If this pump is delivering over 4 bar, then you're probably going to need a pressure reducing valve. Now on this one, it's got the balance cold, and I've used that to feed the WC. Now, is that WC protected from pooey water getting into it? Well, the only water that's going to get down into is the pan. So are you going to drink the water out the pan? Your dog might, but we shouldn't be drinking water out of a toilet pan, should we? So it is protected from getting back into this water main via a non-return valve that could be in there. So anyway, that's the way I've drawn this. So we've got a non-return valve now stopping anything going back into there, and again, depending on what you're putting in, depends on whether you need it or not. It's then sending cold water to a blending valve. It's also sending the water up to the under sink water heater. Now again, depending on lengths of pipe, size of the unit, will depend upon whether you need expansion vessels, pressure relief valves, single check valves, or a pressure reducing valve. All depends on what you pick to actually use to heat the water. Then the water comes down into the blending valve, and it then goes across into the douche. So, can water get from there into there? No. Can this create a vacuum so it sucks it back up and into that cistern? No. So, there is no way the water can get from the toilet into the cold drinking main in this setup. So what's the downside of this setup? Pretty obvious, isn't it? Cost. It will cost you an absolute fortune to put something like this in. Under sink water heaters aren't cheap. These booster sets aren't cheap. The amount of pipe work and installation needed, the amount of space that's needed. So this would put a lot of people off having a douche fitted with all this equipment, even though all this is made to comply with Cat 5 of the water regs. Now, one of the things I was asked in the comments was, what did I think of the toilets, what you could buy off the interweb, where they had built-in bidets. Now, the one I know of, which is this toilet here, is completely compliant with the water regulations because, according to the manufacturers of this toilet seat has an AD air gap built into it, so it is fluid category 5. So there is no way a vacuum could be created from the toilet seat into the feed here and then off into the drinking water. Now, it's a very expensive piece of equipment, and when you turn it on, the little arm comes out into two sections, so you can spray your back and spray your front, and it comes off the cold water main. Now, when I was in Turkey, I did use one of these toilets. I didn't like it very much. It's a bit of a shock. Anyway, so yes, there are toilets out there what you can buy which has a spray unit which comes out of the toilet seat and basically complies with the water regs because it has an AD air gap built into it, and there is no way that pipe can go into the submerged water because of the spillover level of the toilet pan itself as well. These don't comply unless you do all this. Whereas the toilets pre-made have to comply technically to be able to be sold in the UK, because if that toilet was sold here and somebody was poisoned, the manufacturers would be prosecuted for that. Anyway, I'm still saying the safest option, the cheapest option, the space saving option will be to fit a standard bidet with an overspray unit, and then you can feed that with whatever you want, because we've got a UK air gap one in there to protect us from your dirty pooey water getting into the drinking water. So if you do want to wash your body, my advice would be fit one of those old bidets what we've been ripping out for the last 20 years. Anyway, hopefully you've liked the video, and don't forget, I've got my World War II helmet to protect me from all the BS comments, so bring it on.